Hello everyone. Thanks for listening to my stories. I will tell you another story very interesting from real life. I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these. You know, the poor sucker posting on r/surviving infidelity or r/nuclear revenge after his life gets turned upside down. But here we are. And let me tell you, I'm still reeling. My wife, Sarah, and I had been married for 6 years. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, at least. That's what I thought. We had our routines, Sunday morning pancakes, midweek movie nights, and inside jokes that had lasted since college. I was working as a project manager for a mid-sized tech firm, grinding away to hopefully get a senior position in the next year or two. Sarah worked part-time as a graphic designer, which gave her a lot of flexibility. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The late nights. The sudden interest in going to the gym. The way her phone was always face down. But you don't think about those things when you trust someone. You assume everything is normal. Then, one night, everything shattered. It was a Thursday. I got off work earlier than usual because a big meeting got cancelled last minute. I figured I'd surprise Sarah with takeout from her favorite Thai place. I remember walking up to our apartment door, balancing the food, and fumbling with my keys, only to realize it was unlocked. Weird. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was a pair of men's dress shoes by the couch. Not mine. And they sure as hell didn't belong to any of my friends. Then I heard it. Muffled voices. A giggle. My heart started pounding. I walked down the hall, toward our bedroom. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And that's when my whole world collapsed. I stood there, frozen. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Sarah, my wife, was in bed with another man. But it wasn't just any man. It was Mark. My boss. Mark, the guy who always acted like a mentor, who'd bought me beers after late-night projects, who once told me he saw real leadership potential in me. The guy who controlled my paycheck. I don't know how long I stood there. My body felt numb, but my heart was hammering so hard I thought they'd hear it. Then Sarah let out another giggle, and something inside me snapped. I pushed the door open. Both of them turned at the same time. Sarah's face drained of color. Mark, that smug bastard, just blinked like he was still processing reality. What the F***? I finally choked out. Sarah yanked the blanket up, stammering, "It's not what it looks like." Yeah. Because that line has ever worked. Mark scrambled to sit up, looking like a deer in headlights. Hey, man, I didn't even let him finish. I was done listening to bullshit. Without thinking, I grabbed the first thing within reach, a framed photo from our nightstand, and chucked it at him. He barely dodged it, rolling off the bed with a thud. Sarah screamed. I didn't care. I trusted you, I spat at her. I fought for this marriage. And this is what you do. Tears welled up in her eyes. Please, just let me explain. I turned to Mark, who was scrambling to pull his pants back on. And you, I growled, my voice shaking. You're my boss. My F***ing boss ***, how long? Neither of them answered. Sarah just started crying harder. I took a deep breath, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My mind was already racing past the pain, past the betrayal. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make them pay. For a few long seconds, the only sound in the room was Sarah's sobbing. Mark just stood there like a guilty kid caught stealing candy. Pathetic. I took another deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. If I lost my temper now, I'd be the one who looked bad. And I wasn't going to give them that. Instead, I did the last thing they expected. I laughed. Not a normal laugh. A cold, bitter chuckle that made Sarah's sobs hitch and Mark shift uncomfortably. Okay, I said finally, rubbing a hand down my face. All right. Let's play this game, then. Sarah sniffled. Please, it just happened. I cut her off with a sharp look. Don't insult me, Sarah. I'm not an idiot. Mark opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but I turned on him so fast he flinched. Coward. You know what's funny, Mark? I said, tilting my head. You're the one who approved my promotion application. The one I've been waiting to hear back on. His face went pale. Gotcha. Sarah looked between us, confused, but I saw the recognition in Mark's expression. He knew exactly what I was getting at. You're my boss, I continued, voice calm but firm. You control my future at that company. And now, I have a very interesting HR complaint to file, don't I? Mark's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Listen, let's not be hasty. I smirked. Hasty? You weren't worried about hasty when you were screwing my wife, were you? Sarah's face twisted in panic. You wouldn't. I turned to her, shaking my head. You don't know me at all, do you? And with that, I grabbed my keys, my phone, and the takeout I'd originally brought home to surprise her with. Before walking out the door, I looked back at them one last time. Sarah was a mess, clutching the blanket like it could shield her from reality. Mark looked like he was trying to figure out how badly he'd just screwed up. I let out a slow breath. Enjoy the rest of your night, I said, then walked out. They had no idea what was coming next. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind spinning. Betrayal doesn't hit you all at once, it seeps in like poison, numbing everything before the real pain starts. By the time I pulled into an empty parking lot, my hands were shaking. I stared at my phone, debating whether to call someone. But who? My parents? My best friend, Jake? No. Not yet. Instead, I started thinking. Really thinking. Mark wasn't just some random guy. He was my boss. He had power at work, but I had something better, leverage. I pulled up my work email on my phone. Over the years, I'd seen plenty of messages from Mark that skirted the edge of professionalism, casual sexism, borderline shady expense reports, the works. Nothing major, but enough to raise eyebrows if the right people saw it. Then, I opened my personal email and searched for promotion request. Sure enough, there it was, the email I sent 2 months ago, asking Mark about my promotion status. I tapped my fingers against the steering wheel, thinking. If Mark had any say in denying my promotion while secretly screwing my wife, that would look really bad in an HR complaint. Add in the unethical power dynamic? That could ruin him. But I wasn't just going to get Mark fired. That was too easy. I wanted both of them to lose. So, I started making calls. First, a lawyer. A good one. Even if I didn't plan on taking Sarah to the cleaners, I wanted to know my options. Second, HR. Not a formal complaint, yet just a request for a private meeting. I wanted to see how deep Mark had his claws in the company. Third, my landlord. Because there was no way in hell I was staying in that apartment another night. By the time I was done, I felt a strange kind of clarity. The hurt was still there, festering under the surface, but now? Now, I had a plan. And I was going to execute it perfectly. By the next morning, I had a plan. A really good one. First, I made sure Sarah had no idea where I was. I ignored her texts, her calls, all of it. Let her sit in her guilt. Let her wonder what I was up to. Then, I went into work like nothing had happened. Cool, collected, unreadable. Mark was already in the office when I walked in. The second he saw me, I swear I saw the blood drain from his face. He gave me this tight, forced nod, probably hoping I'd let it slide. Not a chance, buddy. I spent the morning working like normal, all while planting little seeds of destruction. Step 1, I forwarded every shady email Mark had ever sent to my personal account. The sexist jokes, the weirdly inappropriate comments about female coworkers, everything. Step 2, I set up a lunch meeting with HR, framing it as concerns about my career progression. Step 3, I looped in a few coworkers who really didn't like Mark, casually mentioning how stressed he'd seemed lately. Gotta build the narrative. Then came the best part. Around noon, I sent Mark a simple Slack message. We need to talk. Alone. Now. 5 minutes later, I was in his office, door closed. Mark cleared his throat. Listen, I know last night was complicated, but. I held up a hand. Save it. I just have one question. He blinked. Okay? I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. Controlled. Dangerous. Did my promotion get denied because of this? Mark hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. I smiled. Thanks. That's all I needed to know. Then I stood up and walked out. He had no idea I just sealed his fate. I walked out of Mark's office with a calmness I didn't even know I had. He, on the other hand, was sweating bullets. That hesitation, that single second of doubt, told me everything. He knew he was screwed. He just didn't know how badly yet. I spent the rest of the afternoon working like normal, pretending nothing was wrong. But behind the scenes? I was moving pieces into place. First, the HR meeting. I walked into the office of Lisa, our HR rep, and shut the door behind me. She gave me a polite smile. So, what's on your mind? I took a deep breath. Time to drop the bomb. Well, Lisa, I have a serious ethical concern about my direct supervisor. It involves a conflict of interest, a hostile work environment, and a personal relationship that may have affected my career advancement. Lisa blinked. That's a lot. Can you clarify? Oh, I could clarify real well. I laid it out in excruciating detail how Mark had been sleeping with my wife, how he had the power to approve or deny my promotion, and how I had reason to believe my personal life affected his decision. Lisa's face slowly transformed from polite interest to full-on HR emergency mode. This is serious, she said, jotting down notes. I'll need documentation. I slid my phone across the table, screen up. I have texts, emails, and call logs. And if you want, I'm happy to pull my apartment's security footage to show he was at my place when he shouldn't have been. Lisa looked at my phone, then back at me. She believed me. I'll have to escalate this, she said carefully. But I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. I smiled. Take your time. I'm patient. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. But I wanted Mark to sweat. Because the next part of my plan? It was for Sarah. The second I walked out of HR, I knew the clock had started ticking for Mark. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Sarah had been blowing up my phone all day. Calls, texts, even a few voice messages that started off defensive and slowly turned into desperate apologies. I ignored them all. Let her squirm. Instead, I went home. Well, not home. I'd already called my landlord that morning and told him I was breaking the lease. Thankfully, he was cool about it, said he'd list the apartment ASAP. But I had one last thing to do before I left for good. I walked in, the place eerily quiet. Then I heard her in the bedroom, crying. Good. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Nice place you've got here. Too bad I won't be staying. Sarah's head snapped up. She looked like hell, red eyes, messy hair, still in the same robe from last night. Oh my God, you actually came home. I raised an eyebrow. Home? No. I came to collect my things. Her face crumpled. Babe, please. Don't. My voice was cold, and it made her flinch. You don't get to babe me anymore. She scrambled off the bed. Get up. I know I did. But please, we can fix this. I let out a sharp laugh. Fix this? You cheated on me with my boss. What exactly do you think we're fixing? She wiped her face, desperation creeping in. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely, you were always working, and... I held up a hand. Stop. Just stop. Her excuses were pathetic. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. You made your choice, I said, walking toward the closet. Now, you live with it. As I grabbed my packed bag, she lunged forward, gripping my arm. You can't just throw everything away. I looked her dead in the eyes. Calm. Unforgiving. You already did. Then, I pried her fingers off me, grabbed my things, and walked out the door. And I didn't look back. Next stop? Destroying Mark. I woke up the next morning in a cheap but decent hotel, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sarah? Gone. That apartment? Gone. Now. Time to finish what I started. I got to work early, grabbed a coffee, and sat at my desk like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, Mark? Oh, he was spiraling. The guy looked like he hadn't slept. His usual cocky swagger? Gone. Instead, he was jittery, checking his phone every 5 minutes. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know when. Then, at 10:37 a.m., HR called him in. A few minutes later, my work chat exploded. Yo, Mark just got pulled into a closed-door meeting. Bro, something's up. He looks pale. Anyone know what's happening? I smirked. By 11:15 a.m., Mark walked out of HR looking like a man who had just received a death sentence. And he had. Turns out, HR took my complaint very seriously. An affair with a subordinate's wife? A clear conflict of interest regarding my promotion? Shady emails? Yeah, that's not a good look. By lunchtime, the news had spread. Mark was being investigated and placed on indefinite leave. Which, in corporate speak, meant he was screwed. I took my lunch break outside, enjoying the sunshine. A message popped up on my phone from Mark. Mark, what the F*** did you do, asterisk? I stared at it for a second, then typed back. Me, karma, buddy. She's a bitch, huh? And just like that, I blocked him. 1 down. 1 to go. Sarah was next. Mark was done. His career? Circling the drain. But there was one last piece of unfinished business, Sarah. I had one final gift for her. See, while I was packing up my things from our apartment, I made sure to take some important documents with me, our joint bank statements. And oh, what an interesting discovery I made. Turns out, Sarah wasn't just betraying me emotionally, she was screwing me over financially, too. She had been quietly draining our savings account. Little by little, hundreds at a time. Shopping sprees, fancy brunches, girls' trips that I now realized were probably Mark-funded getaway weekends. And the best part? The lease on our apartment was in her name. So I made some calls. First, to the landlord, I officially signed off the lease. No more rent payments from me. Second, to the bank, I separated my accounts and flagged all unauthorized withdrawals for review. And third? Well, that was for pure pettiness. I scheduled a mover's service to come collect my remaining furniture, stuff I had bought before we were married. Which meant legally. It was mine. By 5 p.m., I got a text. Sarah, what the hell? Why is all your stuff gone? Why is the landlord saying I have to pay everything alone? I chuckled. Then, I typed back. Me, oh, didn't you hear? We're done. Slightly smiling face, have fun covering rent on your own. Blocked. Sarah? Officially left to drown in her own mess. Mark? Career obliterated. And me? Free. For the first time in years, I actually felt good. But then, I got a call. And it changed everything. I was kicking back in my hotel room, sipping on a well-earned beer, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it. But something told me to pick up. Hello? A pause. Then a familiar voice. Hey, it's Lisa from HR. Oh. This was about to get interesting. What's up? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Lisa hesitated. I wanted to give you a heads up. Mark's, well, it's bad. Worse than we thought. I sat up. Define bad. She let out a slow breath. After your complaint, we started digging into his history. Turns out, he's been playing fast and loose with company money. Expense fraud, shady vendor deals, you name it. And get this, yours wasn't the only HR complaint we found. I grinned. So he's done? More than done. They're giving him a choice, resign quietly or face a full-scale investigation. Either way, he's finished. I couldn't help myself. I laughed. Appreciate the update, Lisa. She hesitated. One more thing. Sarah tried to come by the office today. Security had to escort her out. I blinked. What? She was demanding to see Mark. Said he was ignoring her. Lisa sighed. She made a scene. A big one. I leaned back, smirking. Oh, this was getting better by the second. Sarah thought she was trading up. She thought Mark was her golden ticket. And now? She was watching her safety net burn to the ground. Couldn't have happened to a better person. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Because there was still one last move to make. The days following my conversation with Lisa were a blur of satisfaction and vindication. Mark? Finished. Done. He resigned under duress, just like I knew he would. His career was in shambles, and word on the street was that he was looking for another job. Good luck with that after an HR investigation and a smear campaign that had already begun. As for Sarah? Well, she wasn't faring much better. She was in full damage control mode. After trying and failing to crawl back to Mark, she came to me with her tail between her legs. And I couldn't help but feel a little sick when I saw her. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice shaky as she begged me to listen. Please, just let me explain, she said, standing at my hotel door like I was going to suddenly feel sorry for her. Explain what? I asked, folding my arms. How you betrayed me with my boss. Or how you drained our savings to fund your affair. Her face turned pale. She didn't expect me to have the proof. Too bad. Sarah, this isn't something you can fix. Not with words. Not with tears, I said, my voice colder than I ever thought it could be. I stepped aside and let her into the room. You've made your bed. Now lie in it. She stared at me, lost. But I still love you. I scoffed. Really? After everything? You love me? The same guy you cheated on with my boss? Tears streamed down her face. I made a mistake. A huge one. Please, I'll do anything to make it right. I shook my head. You don't get to fix this. Not after what you did. I'm done. I'm really done. Sarah stood there, eyes wide, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. I grabbed my keys, walked to the door, and stopped right before I left. You'll never see me again, I said, my voice firm. And when you lose everything, when you realize what you threw away, don't come looking for me. And with that, I walked out. The chapter was closed. I was free. But there was one last thing I needed to do before I could finally move on. It was over. At least, it should have been. But there was one last detail to wrap up. One last thing to make sure everything was perfectly destroyed before I could move on with my life. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning. I'd already taken the necessary steps to protect myself financially, but there was something that had been gnawing at me. The affair wasn't just personal, it was professional too. Listen, I said to my lawyer, I want to make sure Mark and Sarah don't walk away from this without some consequences. I want to take them both for everything they've got. They owe me for what they've done. There was a pause on the other end. You want to go the full distance? I didn't hesitate. I want it all. Start by reviewing all their assets and accounts. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was about making sure they understood how badly they'd screwed up. By the time the day was over, my lawyer had already drafted a strategy. Mark would be facing a lawsuit for emotional distress, fraud, and abuse of power. Sarah's unauthorized withdrawals from our joint account, all those little purchases she'd made under my name, would be flagged and taken to court for fraud as well. In the span of 24 hours, I had managed to turn their lives into a nightmare, and they hadn't even seen it coming. But here's the thing. The satisfaction I thought I'd get from destroying them, from watching their worlds come crashing down? It didn't feel as good as I expected. I wasn't happy. I wasn't celebrating. I was empty. I realized then that no amount of vengeance could make up for the pain they had caused me. No amount of money, no legal victory could fix the fact that I had loved Sarah, and I had trusted Mark. And maybe that was the hardest thing of all. So, I took a step back and reflected. I didn't need to tear them apart any more than I already had. I'd done enough. I'd won. As I sat there, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders, I came to an important conclusion. Revenge doesn't heal you. It's like putting a band-aid on a broken bone. It might feel good for a second, but the hurt is still there underneath. And the only thing that really helps is time. I deleted their numbers, blocked them on everything, and spent the next few weeks doing what I should have been doing all along, healing. There's a part of me that will always carry the scars of this. But at least I can say I'm stronger than I was before. And that, in the end, is the best revenge. The end. Thanks for following along with this twisted journey. If you've ever been burned, just know you can rebuild from it. It may feel impossible, but you'll get there. Sometimes, it's the things that break us that shape us into who we're really meant to be. Stay strong.